Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heart of Sports with Jason Springer and Jeff Cohen. We are thrilled to join you on 610 ESPN, ready to help you move into the weekend talking about all the news in the world of sports. Jeff, I am glad to have you back in studio this week. I want to hear later about the anxiety-inducing game you saw against Army.
Can I just say this now? Phew.
Believe me.
That sums it up.
We'll get there. Yeah. I know you didn't get to catch many of the games. You've been stuck at your other day job that we do as well. So did you see that there were 90 combined touchdowns in week 1 in the NFL? That is the most in Super Bowl era.
Yeah. Then what happened what happened last night then?
Weather.
Weather.
It actually was very nice after the rain delay.
That was an awful game.
It's Thursday Night Football. It's never good.
I know.
But
so can I start my annual lobbying campaign to remove Thursday Night Football?
But did you watch?
Yeah, it was awful.
So again, why would they stop showing it if you watch it?
Well, I have a quarterback on one of those teams, but
quarterback.
But he did not play.
Wait,
I did not have
Jeff Cohen just say that he was interested in a sports game because he had a fantasy player or some type of gambling interest in the game?
I did it for
that you wouldn't have watched.
I did it for you.
Because Mr. I don't know the impact of gambling, how that works, if it helps the ratings. He sat there last night and watched the game so he could see the quarterback pile up a couple extra points. Who'd you have in the game, Cam or Jameis?
Cam, I have.
So how frustrated are you they didn't just sneak it on fourth and a half inch?
No, because I didn't have him in. Because I have Carson Wentz.
Wait, so you watched a game that you have a player on that sat on the bench?
I have Carson Wentz.
Oh, you truly are a fantasy guy now.
I have Zach Ertz.
Okay.
I'm rocking some Eagles.
Then you had a good week last week.
No, because we didn't set it up until this week.
Oh, God.
So we missed week 1.
So you missed Wentz's 300-yard performance. I was down there, actually. Yeah. So I know you didn't catch the game. Did you see anything about it?
I saw it afterwards.
I have never heard a roar as loud as when they introduced Deshaun Jackson. It was...
Ever? Did you not watch when they won the Super Bowl and the first game of the next season?
I was not in the stadium for those.
Oh,
for games that I've...
So are you like the tree in the forest guy? If you're not there, then the sound didn't happen?
We talked before the show about the story of my life. If I had a book, would be I didn't know. So yeah, no, it was really loud and people were excited, and then there was some booing because it wasn't the way the people had hoped. But in the end, it was a beautiful day for a game.
All right, well, so I got to call you out on
what?
On one thing.
What?
Because all I heard, and luckily I didn't listen to you in fantasy draft either, was that Miles Sanders was going to be the guy.
He would have had a touchdown if they didn't actually call the penalty on Arcega-Whiteside, and he was the guy for them.
Okay, so how many receptions did he have?
Only a couple, but he had a couple of runs. One? Okay.
4.
So
2 yards.
Okay, so you're judging the rookie by his first game performance.
No, I'm
on a running play that his best play was called back on a holding that the NFL admitted didn't exist.
Heel.
Is that how we're doing this?
No. What I'm saying is that I warned everybody not to overreact.
Wait, is this
one way or the other?
Is this our Jeff needs to be right moment of the show?
Well,
is this
well, that's pretty much all the.
Is this where we are right now?
No, but
Jeff, you were right.
I said, do not overreact. Give this guy time, and don't jump all over him if he doesn't have 100-yard rushing day.
So the funny thing is, I was basically you sitting in the stadium because I was saying...
No, you weren't.
No, I was sitting there...
I could see over the people in front of me.
All right. So shots fired that early in the show. I see where we're going.
I'm tired. Cranky.
I see
That's
you're
right.
cranky. I was sitting there watching the game going, I don't understand why is Jordan Howard on the bench. He was standing on the sidelines and he was running so well, and they were trying to establish it with Miles Sanders. You can see... Why? Because they see the talent in him, and I happen to think that in that type of game, they thought that the defensive line
Whatever
for the Skins
happened
would
to
be
going with the hot hand?
They went with Sproles, man. That was he got much more in the way of touches than I thought that he would get. They were very.
But you're saying Jordan Howard was doing well. I agree with you. Well, then why not run him more? They traded to get him.
I understand. Look, Miles Sanders had 11 carries for 25 yards.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't reflect the touchdown he would have had if the Arcega-Whiteside holding wasn't called back. Jordan Howard averaged 7.3 yards a carry.
The holes in the protection wouldn't have been there otherwise.
No, he was already into the secondary when they called the holding. Anyway, Jordan Howard had 6 carries for 44 yards, averaged 7 yards a carry. I just thought that he was the hot hand. Every time he touched the ball, he was getting chunk plays. I was surprised he wasn't in the game more.
Here's the thing. He's the kind of running back that the more he gets it, the better he does. And you now have a defense that is going to be a leaky sieve all season. Okay? You've lost two of your defensive players, Grugier Hill, and now you lost Malik. So you have to hold on. Time of possession matters now. And the more you can run it and you have the talent to run it, the more you should, because it keeps the defense off the field and fresher.
It's funny you say that. There was about 3 minutes left in the first quarter. I looked up at the clock. They have the stats there in game all game long. And the time of possession was like 10 minutes to 2 minutes for Washington. And after that point is when it really started to turn around. Now, they had some early penalties and things that took them out of rhythm. In the end, though, Carson Wentz had himself a day. 28 of 39 for 313 yards. He completed 8 of 9 attempts under pressure for 132 yards. He was fantastic on third down. How do you feel about Carson Wentz after game 1? And don't tell me
I drafted him, so I must have been
as long as
good.
He doesn't get hit, because that's what Randall on a different show would say, that he's just waiting for him to get hit.
Which means what? He got hit.
He doesn't believe that he will hold up to the.
Look, I get tired of that argument because you can say that pretty much about every quarterback in the NFL except Tom Brady, right? So, any quarterback can get hit. I always worry more about when they get hit and fall down, and then if they brace their arm and break their wrist. That's always the bigger concern.
Sudfeld basically hurt himself.
Yeah, but everybody wanted Nick Foles to stay here because Wentz was supposedly injury prone, and now Nick Foles, unfortunately, has a broken collarbone.
Deshaun Jackson picked up right where he left off. 8 catches on 10 passes.
Hey, what do you mean? Right where he left off from where?
The last time he was with the Eagles. He's still running for touchdowns. He has not stopped doing
where he left off. That was a long time ago.
The exact same thing for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 bombs. They were Wentz's longest completions of the season. Last year, in 11 games without Deshaun, he had 1 touchdown of 50-plus yards. This year, in 1 game, he has 2 touchdowns for 50-plus yards.
I just think that having him on the field, regardless of how he does, makes their offense better.
It opens everything up.
Yeah.
If you look at the breakdown, I was telling you before the show, I was watching Fran Duffy's breakdown of it, and he diagrammed how they basically used Jackson to manipulate different players on the field in the defense to either show the defense that Washington was going to run or to set it up in a coverage package. They wanted to get a matchup out there with something.
Right.
It was just really impressive how they used him. Your thoughts overall on the offensive line, I thought played great. Brandon Brooks played 50 snaps. He was on about a 30-snap count.
It was a rusty, sloppy first half. Game 1, that's what you expect, and then look how quickly everything started to click. I think the offense, as long as people stay healthy, is going to be really good. I just think that the defense I don't expect any 14-10 games with the Eagles this year.
No, they're going to be shootouts. Yeah. Malik Jackson down for the season.
But that's what the league wants.
With a Liz Frank injury in his foot. Happened on the last drive of the game. Other than that, you would have gotten out pretty much unscathed, so that's a tough loss. Sign a player who was with the Dolphins last season for 16 games. So you've got another big body in there. I had seen people say, oh, you move a defensive end inside. I would prefer that them have another big body. They're already thin at end to begin with.
Getting anybody from the Dolphins doesn't mean anything.
He wasn't on the Dolphins this year. It was last year.
They weren't.
Would you trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, the cornerback now who wants out from the Dolphins? I don't know what they'd be asking, but to me, the secondary is a big concern. Right. You saw them get beat a few times.
I think it was a concern before the season. We talked about it before the season started, that the secondary and the linebacking core was the weakness of the team. Is that if you got past the first line of defense, there's a real risk of guys just taking it to the house or having 20, 30-yard runs.
Any other thoughts about what you saw in week 1? Grugier Hill back on the practice field this week, not ready for gameplay, but working his way back.
What's the latest? Like, how long is it going to be?
I still think he's going to be a couple weeks away before he makes it back into a game.
We got to hope so. He's because of his athleticism.
Barnett played well for his first game back. I still have concerns. His shoulder was wrapped earlier this week. So I still have concerns about his ability to last through the season.
Right.
But he has an opportunity this week. We'll get to Atlanta's line later after we talk a little soccer in a few minutes.
Right.
But he has a chance there. Any other thoughts on the team overall? How do you feel coming out of week 1, seeing that they had a 5-point win, which was basically just a backdoor cover?
You got to hope Carson Wentz is healthy and that the offense is just on. It's got just that. I don't know how else to say it. It's pretty simple. It's just whether the offense can score enough points and keep the defense off the field.
Did you catch any other games this week? No?
No.
Don't worry. I'll let you off the hook there. We'll get to a little soccer. Going to bring on now Alexi Lalas. Alexi, you there?
I am here, gentlemen. How are we doing?
We're doing great.
So Alexi, I have to start this with you have no idea how excited Jason is, because we will often, no matter what sport we're talking about, we talk about my alma mater, Michigan, and he's a Rutgers grad.
That's right.
And he is very excited.
Very
to have
excited.
A real Rutgers grad on the show right now.
Very excited about this, Alexi. Thank you for
my goodness.
bringing a little balance to the show
wonderful.
today.
Are you? I love it.
That's right.
All right.
I'm going to make
you guys
Jeff.
gonna
What we don't have in football, we make up in soccer and good looks.
That's right. That's right. And we definitely don't have much of football, but that's a totally different story.
Hey, listen. Hey, Michigan's nothing to talk about right now either.
So the funny thing, Jeff was actually there last week at the big house, and he's still coming down from the anxiety and has no nails left after the Army had that win. So.
Well, and Alexi, what you should know is that when it comes to football, Rutgers actually is better than Michigan in their locker room, because we had the guy who designs locker rooms for colleges on, and he said the Rutgers locker room is state of the art, and Michigan's is really bad.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
I grew up in Michigan, and one of the reasons why I ended up at Rutgers was because Michigan at that time didn't even have a soccer program, and so I have no real connection to Michigan other than growing up in Michigan. So
yeah, they had
whether
a club
they're good
team.
or bad on or off the field doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, they had a club team when I was there.
Well, you weren't quite in Jersey the other night. You were out in St. Louis for the U.S.-Uruguay match out there. A little bit different atmosphere than the week before at the Mexico game. What's it been like for those men's national teams games the last few ones?
It's just an amazing time right now. Whether you're into soccer or not, I've never been at a moment in U.S. soccer history when there is more, anger, confusion, sadness, but really kind of apathy when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. Now, the absolute opposite is with the U.S. women's national team, but not qualifying for the World Cup in 2018 in Russia was huge, and it just has had this cascade ripple effect onto so many different things. But really what we're looking at right now, each and every time the men's team now gets to play, is a lot of people with their arms crossed, and rightly so, and that's completely fair, saying this team isn't good, or is this team going to be good? Why should I spend my time watching a team that didn't qualify for the World Cup last time? Is this team going to qualify? And even that is a question right now. And despite the failure from a couple of years ago, it still should not be a level of accomplishment for the U.S. men's national team to qualify. So the new coach in Greg Berhalter, I think each and every time it's a battle for hearts and minds to win over, yes, the soccer people, but I think just to win over the general public, as to give them a belief that this is heading in the right direction and that this will come to fruition in 2022 in Qatar, and then obviously in 2026 when the U.S. hosts the Men's World Cup for the first time since 1994. They're
clearly in a transition phase under Greg Berhalter. I saw you say, I think it was on your weekly podcast that you do, that he's trying to paint the Sistine Chapel with crayons. Is he the right coach at the right time, and is he going about it the right way?
I think he's the right coach. I got a lot of time and respect for Greg Berhalter. And look, I know you guys talk about a lot of other sports, and this is an evergreen type of question when it comes to all sports. And all teams and all coaches go through it. Do you have the system and then go get the players that fit that system, or do you look at the players that you have and then adjust the system according to the players? And I think right now, Greg Berhalter has come in, and maybe it's because of that failure that he's been able to come in and say, look, we're going to throw everything out, and we're going to start again, and we're going to do something big and bold. Well, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of people want to see a more evolved and progressive type of play, and that's what Greg Berhalter is certainly implementing. But in order to do that, you're going to have to fail. And they failed epically the other day against Mexico. And it was this you guys, have you guys ever seen the movie Tin Cup? There was this Tin Cup type of moment where rather than be pragmatic and safe and do what, to be quite honest, we would have done in the past in the way that we played, he just kept going for the green over that water as opposed to laying up.
It's one of the best scenes in sports movies.
And
there's a beauty in it.
It's a great way to describe.
But ultimately, it's about winning in sports, as you guys know.
It's a great way to describe what they did, because they did exactly that. They just kept going for it, despite the fact they kept dunking it in the water. It turned into an ugly loss, and you have the hope there. You mentioned the players. Is this something that they have the players in the system to bring them up to do this, or do they need more of a youth movement to bring up some of those players to move away from the veterans? Where are we with the talent right now for men's soccer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it goes back to what I said earlier, in that there's this desire to have this team provide hope. Well, how do you provide hope? Well, you start to win, and that applies to all sports. And yet, this isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, because, as I said, big, bold, grand type of change is difficult. If you just want to be a better version of yourself, that is both quicker and easier. If you want to do something completely different and be something you've never been, which is what Greg Berhalter believes in, that takes much longer, and that is much harder. So I think maybe he does not have, and I use the Sistine Chapel and crayons type of analogy. I don't think he has the tools and the quality of tool right now to create this masterpiece and the beauty that he wants. But it doesn't mean that by doing this, he's not establishing, look, this is what we need. And every player that's coming up recognizes that. And by the way, every coach that is out there recognizes that if you want to play for the national team, these are the types of things that you have to do that you haven't been tasked with doing in the past. It's a fascinating case study. I don't know how this is going to end. Obviously, everybody just wants to win. But I think many years from now, we're going to look back, whether it's a success or failure, and be fascinated at how this all played out from a psychological perspective, both for the players and the coaches that are there, but also from the greater American soccer community and how we respond to this.
Is it one of those situations where maybe you should be playing more of the kids that actually were playing with crayons just a few years ago, and letting them develop together? For example, we're lucky enough to cover people like Brendan Aronson. People that have grown up in the system in American soccer and now are starting to succeed. But Brendan obviously has a ways to go. The talent is there. Is he and people that are his age, would it be better if we're going to fail anyway at this level, would it be better to have them playing together for a longer period of time with an eye on 2022 and 2026?
It would, but once again, be careful what you wish for, because there are costs to that, and maybe they're not. Maybe and there's a price to that, and maybe people aren't willing to pay that. And this is what I mean by that. We live in my estimation, in the greatest country in the world. The thing that makes us great, I think, is the diversity that we have. But that same diversity makes it incredibly challenging and difficult to put 11 men on the field to represent this country, because everybody has a different idea of how the game should be played. We don't have any shared type of history, and therefore a general understanding and agreement as to how we're going to play the game. And that's because we have all of these different ideas and all these different communities and cultures and histories and backgrounds, and we try to mix it all together, and it's very, very difficult. But if you're going to establish, hey, regardless if it's Greg Berhalter or anybody else, whoever comes in and says, this is how we are going to play, what it means is you are going to be more exclusive as opposed to inclusive. And that scares a lot of people to say that. But what you're doing is you're establishing, this is how the team's going to play. If you want to play for this team, you have to be able to fit that template out there. And it doesn't mean that just because you are a good player, okay, doesn't mean that you get to play for the national team. There might be some very, very good players that don't fit that. And once again, it gets back to this whole thing of is that the right way to go? Or do you just recognize that there's so many different ways of thinking at it, and we're just going to try to fit them all together and create this new thing? That's much harder, and that's certainly more difficult to do. It's not that it can't be done, but this is the unique aspect of American soccer that a lot of people either don't realize or don't want to talk about.
Okay, so then the question becomes, is Greg Berhalter the guy that has enough influence in U.S. soccer to implement whatever his vision so that everybody comes together for the players that fit whatever system they choose? Or is there anybody in U.S. soccer that can do that?
I think that Greg Berhalter for this particular task is as good as anybody out there. And it doesn't mean that there aren't others with more experience that could come in. But I think because he is this true believer and this romantic in what he wants to do, and he wants to do something bigger and different and special, I think he is certainly one of the men or women that could possibly come in and do this. Having said that, there are others that argue, and I could certainly get on this side, where you come in, and especially with a national team, where it's not day in and day out, and so you don't have that progress and that understanding and that development and then that weekly ability to assess on the weekend for those games, that it might be better to be more pragmatic and just be a better version of yourself and take what we've done in the past and just make it better, as opposed to trying to make so many people so uncomfortable and taking them out of their comfort zone in so many instances that it's just very, very difficult, and it's going to take so long. And in that time, by the way, you're going to lose people that are just going to lose faith and not pay attention. But I don't know what the answer is. I think for me, I love that there is the opportunity to do something that we've never seen before, and there is also the potential for it to completely go to hell and to fail miserably. But even if it fails miserably, there's a romantic part of me that says it was worth doing.
And there'll be a lot of debate for people like us to have if it does fail miserably or if it does go well.
It gives us plenty of content. You guys know that.
Plenty to talk about.
That's what we all want.
And I mean, you talk about a team that sort of is at the pinnacle, sort of the opposite of where they are is the women's team. I mean, you were here, we were there for the game at Lincoln Financial Field a few weeks ago where they set the attendance record for just a friendly. Talk a little bit about what you've seen with that team and where they stand right now at this moment in time, given the history they've made already and the barriers they keep trying to break going forward.
Yeah, they are rock stars. They are legends, not just for women's soccer or American soccer, but for sports. And in many instances, they've transcended the sport, and they've entered into that whole cultural experience and pop culture and everything else. And it's because they win consistently. They win when people are always expecting them to win. They're big, bold, fearless personalities on and off the field. They believe in what they're doing. They love to break down barriers. They love to be disruptors. All of those different things have played into why they are so popular. And by the way, I don't know if it's hurt. Hurt is the right word, but it makes it that much more challenging and difficult when you juxtapose it with the men. For the men, because they're constantly being compared and contrasted with the women. Now, whether that is fair or not, that's for another day and another debate, but that is constantly happening. And you're dealing with the greatest team in the world, one of the greatest teams ever to play the game, that consistently gives the people what they want and gives the American people what they want, which first and foremost is a winner. And a winner that they can count on in a game that traditionally, and a lot of this applies to the men's side, we have not been able to dominate.
And a winner with personalities. I mean, real personalities of the game.
Yep, and people want to see that. And whether you like, I love sports because of the personalities. I love sports because of the narratives and the stories and the heroes and the villains out there and the good and the bad and all that kind of stuff. That's great. I mean, this summer when I was working over in France doing the Women's World Cup, when that 11 or 13-0 game, what was it? 13? How much? What?
13-0. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. That was manna from heaven as far as from a TV perspective. It changed everything. And as you guys know, people that didn't really care about soccer or weren't even necessarily watching or were just going to wait till later, automatically because of the celebration and the debate as to was it good sportsmanship and all that kind of that's all great stuff. And the Megan Rapinos of the world and the way that they interacted off the field and with the president and all that was all wonderful stuff for us to talk about. But ultimately, through all of that controversy and all of those different stories that were churning, they backed it up on the field, and that's what I think people ultimately appreciate about this team.
Which, in the end, it wouldn't have been as significant, the things they were doing and saying, if they didn't back it up with their play.
Yeah, and that's what they have built their entire mythology on, and it's wonderful because obviously it's soccer. And look, I don't care if it's men's, women's, co-ed, naked, doesn't matter. As long as people are kicking a ball, I love it, and I am forever going around and talking about this game that I love, because I've seen, you talked about Rutgers. When I was at Rutgers back in the 80s, the soccer landscape was very, very different. And look, we got a long way to go, but sometimes we kick ourselves for what we haven't done as a soccer playing nation. And every once in a while, I like to pat ourselves on the back for how far we've actually come. It's unprecedented when you put it up with every other culture and country and leagues around the world, how far we've gotten. We still got a long way to go. And when I say the development of soccer, it's not men's, women's, it's just soccer. And the women's team in particular have done a tremendous job of driving home, yes, the importance of women's soccer, but more importantly, just the importance of soccer out there. They are not women's soccer stars. They are soccer stars.
I do want to get to the local angle here with the union and the excitement they're creating, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You got to talk to Carly Lloyd right after the game. There's another personality for you. We've had her on the show. She made some headlines, potentially getting offers to kick in the NFL. Your thoughts on that whole situation? I know you got to ask her about it.
Yeah, I've known Carly for a long time, and I love her. And you talk about a legend, both from a Rutgers standpoint and from a soccer standpoint. What she has done is incredible. And I've never met a more competitive athlete in my time covering the sport. So, the whole football thing, I love it. I love that she, because, both her and all the women are really, really savvy, and they're really, really smart, and they understand how media works, and they understand leverage, they understand how to use it. And I love that she used the NFL, and to a certain extent, the NFL used her in this moment. And she got that glint in her eye when I asked her the question. She wasn't going to give too much away, but look, every soccer player, man or woman, at some point has found themselves when they're growing up or wherever on an American football field, kicking field goals. And inevitably, you'll hit a long one, and everybody will turn around and go, "Hey, you should do that in the NFL." We all know as soccer players that just because you can kick a football through the uprights a long distance on a field does not make you a place kicker. And Carly Lloyd knows that better than anyone. But having said that, if her only job is to walk on the field and to hit field goals, nobody's going to ask her to tackle anybody. This whole disingenuous side of people saying, "Oh, she's going to get hurt. We're really worried for her safety." No, you're not. You're not worried about her safety. As a matter of fact, a lot of people want to tune in specifically to watch her get crushed by a 300-pound man.
I bet you she would be a great tackler. I have no doubt.
But the whole point is that any place kicker is never asked to do anything anyway.
Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker's made 5 tackles his whole career, and nobody questions whether he's a good kicker.
Put her past her. It would be wonderful to see. I would love to see what it looked like. I would love to see the reaction and the consternation out there from a lot of people who say she can't do it, but either in a veiled reference to the fact that she can't do it because she's a woman. If she fails, it's not because she's a woman. It's just because she wasn't good enough.
All right. So now I got a question. You said every soccer player at one point or another has gone through this. When you were at Rutgers, were you on a football field trying field goals?
Absolutely. I was out there. And actually, we played on the practice football field up there at Rutgers. So we always had the uprights up there and stuff like that. But once again, while we enjoyed poking the bear, if you will, that is football, and saying, "Hey, look how easy it is." All of us, and I lived with football players when I was at Rutgers. I understood first off what the game was in general, but I also understood from a kicking perspective how very different the kicking is, and the ability to only take 2 steps, and the ability to get it up and over, and the ability in terms of the pressure that's involved, and it's very, very different than an isolated type of an insulated type of situation out there. Now the pressure for Carly Lloyd, look, she's been the player of the year. She's won World Cups. We've all played in front of thousands of people. As a matter of fact, a lot of soccer players have played in front of much bigger crowds than football players out there, so that wouldn't be necessarily such a big deal. But I think we're all realistic as to the specific tools that you need and the abilities and the skill that it takes to do that specific position, and doesn't necessarily relate to how good you are as a soccer player.
I could keep asking you so many other questions, so I'll have to ask you back another day. But I did want to, before we let you go, get your sense of the Union. They've got a huge matchup with LAFC here this weekend. I can't wait to be down there and hear the energy at Talon Energy Stadium. You want to talk a little about what you're seeing with that, with the MLS and the Union this year?
look, the Philadelphia Union, I got a lot of respect for what Jim Curtin has done down there. And, I think he'd be the first one to admit that, had he probably been at some different teams over the last few years, there's a good chance that he would have been moved on and fired. He wasn't, and he's been given time to kind of figure it out. But even when you talk to Jim Curtin this year, I think it's also one of those things where the best laid plans ultimately came to fruition, and the best possible thing happened in terms of getting a group. Because when you look at the group, there's not massive stars out there. Yes, there's some guys with good resumes out there, but it's not as if everybody is tuning in each week to see a Zlatan Ibrahimovic type of player or a Carlos Vela type of player out there. So it is that proverbial teamwork, and team is much more important than the individual. And I think you've got a great leader in Jim Curtin who has been given the time in a unique situation there to get this right. I do think there's an element of trying to put your finger on why it happened this year as opposed to any other years, I think is difficult, both from the outside looking in, from my perspective, and from the inside looking out. But you don't have to answer that, because whatever is happening right now, you keep doing it. And I've talked to Jim Curtin. It's not as if he's training the team differently or they're eating anything different. It's just the fact that he's got a good quality, solid team. He's got some depth that comes off the bench that makes a difference. All of those different things that everybody wants. Haven't been a whole lot of injuries out there. He's had players that he thought were going to be at a certain level that for whatever reason have come in and played at a higher level. All the things that coaches talk about in a preseason in any sport have kind of have played out in a positive way for him. And that's why they're sitting in second place. But we all know it's all fine and well to make the playoffs, and maybe it's an accomplishment for a team like the Philadelphia Union that isn't a traditional type of playoff team, but they're not going to, they can't rest on their laurels. And when it comes to MLS, it's about MLS Cup. So really, what you did in the regular season, you'll get a clap and maybe a pat on the back. But then, what have you done for me lately? All right, it's Janet Jackson, and you got to figure out how to parlay what you did in the regular season to the postseason. And unfortunately, it doesn't always translate.
Well, as we get closer, we would love to have you back on, talk about that and everything else. But we really appreciate the time you gave us today and the takes you had.
Thanks, guys. All right. Are you?
There we go. That's right, Jeff. You heard that.
Wow.
You have a great one. Thanks, man. Jeff, that's
look at you. You're beaming.
It's a Rutgers guy on the show.
We've never had anybody go. Are you?
I get kind of excited when there's somebody there backing me up.
We're gonna have like a Roy Hinson or somebody like that on.
We'll see if I'm still beaming through the break. When we get back, we're gonna talk lots of fantasy sports. Stick with us.
Sports lets people live their dreams, overcome obstacles, and achieve goals. But what's your unimaginable? Do you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself? To push your limits? The A-Fatty clothing brand believes we're all capable of going far beyond we previously imagined, to overcome your obstacles and achieve your goals. Life gives you the chance to push harder, to dream bigger, and to do whatever it takes to conquer the unimaginable. And to do it with A-Fatty On You, the original street leisure clothing brand.
Taking you into the weekend with the latest news in the world of sports, with the biggest names on and off the field. It's The Heart of Sports each and every Friday at 4 p.m. on 610 ESPN, with former players, reporters, and commentators like Adam Schefter, John Runyon, Keith Jones, Trey Thomas, and Doug Glanville. Jason Springer and Jeff Cohen cover the agony and ecstasy of fandom while weaving in conversations about the impact of sports on society. That's The Heart of Sports, Fridays at 4 p.m. Welcome back to The Heart of Sports with Jason Springer and Jeff Cohen. Jeff, now that you are a fantasy expert with your league, I'm going to get you up to speed on something even deeper. A little daily fantasy, some gaming action. Albert Chen, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Albert Chen, senior editor for Sports Illustrated, and Jeff has the book in his hand, author of $1 Billion Fantasy.
Yep, we were holding it up in our little pregame. I do have to ask a question, though, Albert. Could you pick a longer title?
I know, seriously. That I think I'll just go with $1 Billion Fantasy.
Right, there you go.
Ignore everything else.
Well, but for people who haven't seen it yet, go out and buy it, because it really it doesn't read like a documentary type book. It reads like a novel, and it's called $1 Billion Fantasy: The High Stakes Game Between FanDuel and DraftKings That Upended Sports in America.
And when you were writing this, your goal was to make it more like a novel, a character-based story, as opposed to a fact-based story. The facts sort of were the background to the characters in the foreground. Can you talk a little bit about where this came from for you, the idea and the characters, some of the more fun ones that you explored in the process here?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this started with these two companies, DraftKings and FanDuel, being all over the news. Go to football season 2015, first few weeks, and as Trevor Noah at the Daily Show put it, you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing a zombie, a Kardashian, or a fantasy football ad. It was ridiculous. I mean, every 90 seconds, these companies were on. So, they got massive very quickly, all over everyone's, living rooms. And then there was sort of a scandal because there was allegations of insider trading. But then what that turned into was attorney generals across the country looking at whether these were gambling operations. And so it was kind of a roller coaster startup story. Really, the end of the book is getting to this moment in 2019 when these companies are essentially sports betting companies and pretty well positioned for a larger landscape that I think is going to change dramatically over these next few years. But it's kind of a broad, big story where, you can get into a lot of different themes. But what I wanted to sort of bring to it was just kind of like a more sort of smaller, intimate story that tells this larger story, but through the lens of just like 5 or 6 characters, which include the founders of both companies.
Well, you start off the book with a bang, with the title of the first chapter being betting on Brett Favre with bar mitzvah money.
Which otherwise is the story of my life, basically. Not that my mom wants to hear that. Sorry, Mom. But,
yeah. So your book came, and that was the first thing I did. Is I called Jason. I said, I swear I haven't read the first chapter yet, but I'm pretty sure it's about your life.
Can you talk a little bit about what they tapped into? Jeff is now doing Fantasy League, which is very exciting for me because he has finally embraced this. But this was more than just the social aspect of fantasy. This was daily fantasy. This was more of an isolated thing where people were literally trying to be their own general managers, and then the amount of money that became involved. Can you just talk about the growth that happened basically overnight with some of these companies?
Yeah, it was really kind of just remarkable to watch. I mean, it did take a long time. FanDuel came along first, then it was DraftKings, and it was a slog to really get this business off the ground. But what they tapped into, it was definitely a perfect storm of just like investor money coming in, but also technology, people starting to just go straight to mobile. And once you got something that you can play in your hands, like that is that's huge. Now, you make a great point that these games, which were daily fantasy, and you can play, every other day, every day if you want, depending on what sporting events are going on, you're winning money on a potentially daily basis, probably losing money more than often. But it's very different from the traditional season-long sports games that, 50, 60 million Americans play. What this is just a kind of a, fantasy on steroids. It really is just like all about the money. And you make a good point. I mean, it's not really about the social aspect. It really is about the money at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me, look, in my prior life, I've been open on the show that I did dabble in gaming a little bit and dabble occasionally. But the thing that I found interesting was the difference in the companies. FanDuel, the chief marketing officer who you talk about, was a mother of 3 from Scotland who wasn't even a sports fan. The CEO, her husband, wasn't a fan either, and you get into the boardroom with some of these people. Tell us a little bit about some of these characters, because they seem kind of fascinating. The DraftKings guys, I think they called them suicide bombers because of how much money they raised, and they wanted to blow the whole thing up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the FanDuel, both founding groups are interesting in completely different ways. The guys from the UK were the Brits, who didn't really, a few of them followed some sports, but for the most part, they were not sports fans and certainly not fantasy sports fans. The first chief marketing officer of FanDuel and co-founder of FanDuel was Leslie Eccles, and she was the one that kind of created the machine where they just did brilliant ways to acquire customers, and that was because they, were sort of outsiders who looked at this market and thought of sort of different ways to to market this game. And they did local radio was really effective for them. Papers, in Philadelphia, in fact, like they really made a lot of strides in terms of hitting on the Philadelphia market because of just the level of passion there. So it's kind of an unexpected character there for sure. And then, Tom Griffiths, the chief product officer, also from, PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh, and decides that he's going to leave his PhD program for this. And then the CEO is Nigel Eccles, who grew up on a dairy farm in Ireland and is still not a sports fan at all. And
they were all just entrepreneurs looking for a business, right?
They're looking for a business, yeah, and they were looking for something that would make them some money. And they're no longer with the companies, but at DraftKings, the three guys are still there. As you said, suicide bombers. Their strategy was to raise an insane amount of money and burn through it all in terms of marketing, just to get their name out there and to catch up to the market leaders. And lo and behold, they were absolutely successful in doing that.
Can you talk a little bit about the scandal in 2015 and how they got the attention of the FBI and the DOJ?
And how they got through it.
Yeah.
Well, it all started with a New York Times story that presented sort of this story alleging that a DraftKings employee won $350,000 playing on FanDuel. And a lot of questions were raised there. Was he using insider information? Was he looking at other lineups, ownership percentages, on and on and on. And he was actually pretty quickly cleared by an independent investigation, but it did sort of show, put a spotlight on this industry where people were kind of wondering why employees were playing these games. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But then what the scandal really became was whether or not these were, once there was a lot of scrutiny, the questions were about whether these were illegal gambling businesses. Once those ads were out there, once the New York Times did the story and things started to snowball, then you had states shut down FanDuel and DraftKings in a handful of states, including New York for a while. And how did they survive? Well, a lot of it was just really having to pass bills at a state-by-state basis. Like New York passed a daily fantasy sports bill in August 2016. And look, I know presenting the story where the climax of the story happens, like with passing of a state bill in Albany, may not sell a lot of books, but the insanity was really getting to that point and getting to the point where they were just surviving through the fall. And really what it is about is just like the emotional ups and downs of both groups. They went through it all, and they made a lot of mistakes along the way, but the companies survived.
How close were they to going under?
Well, they were very close to being in big trouble. I mean, they were in big trouble. They would go into the office every day wondering, what state was going to be next to shut them down. New York was kind of critical in August 2016 because actually it was the summer. It was before that. It was the summer of 2016 where they passed this bill. It really was like a 50-50 proposition whether or not that bill would have been passed. And I mean, you had FanDuel employees, the night before thinking that bill wasn't going to pass and saying, well, we had a great run, because without New York, they don't have a ton of customers. They lose a huge chunk of customers, their biggest customer base, in fact. And, without that, they would have been shut down. Another number of other reasons. Payment processors were going to pull the plug on this thing that regulators were calling illegal gambling operations. So at many points, they were really close to going under.
You do a lot of research before you write your books and write your articles. What was the thing that you took away from this that you didn't expect to find?
Well, at the heart of this it's a startup story. So it really is, it's not even a sports story. It's not even about gambling and fantasy sports. I mean, that's all sort of in the background. It really is, what does it take to build a business like this? and show others that this is something to believe in. I mean, at the end of the day, they raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which is kind of crazy. And the other part of the story is just how they survived and just kind of the resilience of these two companies, but also the role that chance and luck play in startups and companies where it's all about timing. And look, it's huge to present a big vision, but if you are in the right place at the right time, that is a massive, massive opportunity.
So we go from those issues, fast forward to 2018, and the Supreme Court allows legalized gambling. How has that changed things? Because it seems like these companies now, you know, if you look in New Jersey, I think DraftKings, like 50% of their business is gaming, just like 10% is daily fantasy. If I check on Jeff's phone, he probably has an app to go on DraftKings or something else. Now,
by the way, he's pretending he doesn't know, but there's a FanDuel app on my phone.
There is a FanDuel app on his phone. So how has that changed the business? Are these gaming companies now as opposed to daily fantasy companies?
They want to be gaming companies, and I think soon they will be. I mean, I think daily fantasy is becoming a very small part of their business. Now, it still is a big part of their business because gambling is illegal in the vast majority of states, but that's going to begin to change with the Supreme Court decision last year. So you're going to have more and more states going forward passing essentially, legalizing sports betting on a state-by-state basis. I mean, you can just look at New Jersey. I mean, you pick a great state because, I'm in New York. I can cross the George Washington Bridge, and once I'm in New Jersey, I can take out my phone and place a $20 bet on the New York Mets to win that. In fact,
that would be a bad bet.
In fact, that'd be a terrible bet. You're right. I don't know why I would even want to do that. But you can also bet on what's going to happen in the next at bat, how many runs are going to be scored in inning. I mean, there are just a lot of different kind of variations that both these companies are really poised to take advantage of. Over the summer, there were more bets placed in terms of overall handle in New Jersey than in Nevada, which means that New Jersey quietly became sort of the sports betting capital of the country. So things are changing pretty rapidly, and right now these two companies and many, many others are just trying to position themselves best they can because there's just no question that this is going to be a massive, massive thing.
So what do you see next? Do you see it similar to like in Europe where there's in sports, in arena betting? Is that where we're going with it? That literally
we're already there in some places.
Pitch by pitch, throw by throw, shot by shot, that this is where we're going to go next with this?
Yes. I mean, there's no question about it. That's what it is. I mean, it's not even, you can be in an arena, who knows, depending on the state. But, I mean, that's what's going to be kind of interesting is every state's going to be different. But, the game changer is, you can bet on games as you're watching them or somehow participate with them, whether it's from your living room couch or at an arena as the game is going on. And it just makes this game that is a 20-point blowout a lot more interesting, and you want to follow it because you are invested in how that game is going to actually play out. So that is sort of that's the future. And I think like a lot of it is going to be the creativity on the part of the companies where that you can create your own bets, say, that, okay, I'm predicting that, the Patriots are going to, drive, have 3 first downs and this drive is going to end on a field goal. And you can get sort of, very large odds if you put down $5 to win, say, $200. And I think like that's where kind of the potential is where, I mean, it really is endless, the different sort of variations of these games that there could potentially be. I mean, we think of it as, okay, I'm going to put $20 on the Patriots, but man, there is a lot more that you can do with just one football game.
You mentioned the creativity. I'm a marketer at heart. They've been on the forefront of messaging. They've had partnerships with leagues, their ability to market themselves to get investors. What's the legacy of these companies going to be when we look back?
Well, the story's still being written, so we'll see where things go from here. I think right now they are pretty well positioned to be two of the biggest, if not the two biggest, sports gambling companies in America. There are going to be other players, of course, media companies, and you got casinos that are interested. I think the legacy is, this is these last few years have been a very unique time, and I think almost a bridge from, the traditional fantasy sports that so many people are aware of and play, 50 to 60 million fantasy players out there, to get from that to this, world where gambling, if you've got a phone and an internet connection, you can place a bet at any time to make a sporting experience just a lot more interesting. So that's what the future is. And I think the legacy is this was part of the story of how we got there. And that to me is going to be, because the story is going to be so massive, I think it's a great window to how we got to that kind of new world that it will be soon for everybody.
Well, we definitely encourage everybody to go out and pick up the book, $1 Billion Fantasies, the high-stakes game between FanDuel and DraftKings that upended America. Albert, thanks so much for hopping on with us and going through everything. We appreciate it. Hope to have you back another time in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Have a great one. Jeff. I know that you found another chapter in his book.
Wait!
That describes my life.
I want to get it right. I want to get it so right.
Go ahead, find it.
I mean, look, it's really not that hard.
No, it's
because when I was reading the book, the bar mitzvah money thing was like the perfect opening to the book.
And then you found the close. That's perfect.
And then you get to page 200, and there's actually a chapter, which, by the way, apropos, is actually chapter 13.
Okay.
It's called Jason's Delusion.
So this is a perfect book for me.
So I really think that as good as the book is, that he really missed it by not including you as a major character in the book.
I would have taken some of those royalties. Now that our guests are gone, I believe you have a bone to pick with Brett on the other side of the glass.
Brett, a good producer, when Alexi Lalas breaks out Janet Jackson, what have you done for me? Boom, that music should have come on.
He thought that you'd have Googled the music because now he's got it stuck in his head. Can you tell him to go away?
Go away, Jeff.
Here's the problem.
You actually got me scared with that because when I called him, I butchered his name, and he was just who's this?
That's
Who's the producer?
Oh, no.
His name is Albert. What did you butcher?
Not Albert.
His name is Alexi. How hard is that?
So I said Alexa or something, and he was just like, "Who's this?"
What are you talking to the Amazon
no,
thing?
Butchers the name.
Oh,
and he started laughing.
Brett, thanks for joining the show.
You butchered the name?
Yeah.
Did Jeff not spell it correctly?
Man,
I spelled it correctly.
Alexi, if you're listening to the rest of the broadcast, we're sorry.
Jeff, can you send him an apology email?
So when he brought him up, I was like, "Uh oh," he probably said something to Jeff.
By the way, I forgot to mention. I grew up in East Brunswick, so I saw him play when Rutgers was right around the corner. So we did go to the soccer games, but didn't see him kick any field goals. But
no. All right, where are we going next? We've got about 5 minutes left in the show. We're going to talk Eagles, Falcons.
I'll tell you exactly where we're going to go.
Where
okay, Baker Mayfield. Because
you're on your Browns kick again.
I had to listen to the Baker Mayfield is the superstar of the league. Can you remind me what he did last week?
Yeah, he struggled. They didn't have a good week.
Even Brett knows what happened.
They didn't have a very good week.
Come on, they lost to the Titans.
But he's back at it this Monday night against the Fighting Mono Jets, who like everybody on the team is either sick or injured or something going on with them.
So you mentioned this before the show, and all I can say is if they beat the Jets, you know what that's like?
I'm afraid to hear what that's like, Jeff.
That's like a 25-year-old beating up a 90-year-old man. If you lose, it's embarrassing, and if you win, you were kind of supposed to, right?
Okay.
So, come on.
So, do you feel better now that you got that out?
I just don't see
Brett, who's your suicide pool this week?
I haven't really picked yet, but
it's Survivor
after Jeff said
pool.
that, I'm thinking about the Browns.
Oh, you're going with the Browns this week?
I think. Don't hold me to it. I haven't really picked yet.
Jeff, what do you think about that pick?
Do it.
I just love the fact that you left.
Just do it.
Hey, by the way, we haven't said it on the air. There will be tickets in the coming weeks. I'm going to get to do a sit-down with former Major League Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig.
There you go.
October 30th. Mm-hmm. He's got a new book out. So there's a book festival. And, Jeff, you're going to help me prep and so I don't look foolish and have questions?
Absolutely.
Throw things at me when you don't like the way I ask something.
Actually, it should be very interesting because the book that he's written is very candid, and Bud Selig is kind of always been that reserved guy.
That's
right?
what surprised me the most, sort of reading the reviews about it. I'm waiting for them to get me the book, but it seems like he really opens up about a lot of the issues that people have asked questions about, and I'm pretty excited to be able to get to ask him. I got to be honest. I'm like making a list
I'm
at
glad
home.
he's not calling into the show.
Why?
Because Brett would probably call him like Bob or something like that.
Bud is a hard
That's
name.
all we would need is the commissioner of baseball.
Oh, my goodness. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, he asked for my name. He's like, what's your name? I'm in trouble.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you imagine what would he call Faye Vincent? I mean, we could go through the list, right?
We know how Brett's able to butcher names. That's a whole nother show segment in itself. What are you expecting this Sunday night? Eagles play at 8 o'clock, 8:20 actually in Atlanta. Atlanta had a terrible game last week, getting blown out by Minnesota. Did not look good at all.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Is Julio Jones playing?
He's going to play.
Yeah.
They have some offensive line issues, though.
Yes, they do.
Their first-round pick is out.
I don't think their defense is very good either.
I think we're going to see
I'm
what
not
they are. They have
impressed.
new coordinators. They have players coming back from injury, so I'm not sure what that team really is yet.
How far has that team fallen since that Super Bowl loss?
I don't think they've recovered.
That's it. I do not think that they ever recovered. They always say there's a letdown the next year, but I think that team just fell apart.
But look, I mean, no team wants to start season 0-2, so they're going to come home and they're going to play well at home. The Eagles have played well against Julio Jones. He's gotten yardage in their recent contests, but not as many touchdowns.
And you're saying that because you probably have him on your fantasy team.
I do have him on my fantasy
Oh my
team.
God! Seriously?
Yes.
That's why.
Yes.
You are
uniquely
so
aware.
transparent.
Says the guy who stayed up last night to watch a game with a player that's on his team that's on the bench. I'm the transparent one here.
It's called scouting.
Is that scouting? Okay. Is that what this is?
Uh-huh.
You got a pick this week?
For
the game.
For the Eagles game?
Yes. Last week you thought by over 10 you were wrong. How are you going to be wrong this week?
31-27.
You think they win? That's actually around where I thought. I thought it'd be a higher.
But it'll be another one where the Eagles, it won't be as close as the score looks, and then the Falcons will score late.
I did want to give you a chance before we get off the air. I am going to go down to the Union game tomorrow night, so we'll see if we get any audio. Like I said to Alexi,
what you're going to see? I'm predicting that I don't know if they have a decibel meter. That loudest game that they have ever had there.
I think so. Jeff, 1 minute left, so you get 40 seconds of it.
Phillies?
Ohio State can have the word "the," and LeBron can have Taco Tuesday. Say something good.
Taco Tuesday, I don't care about. LeBron's just a dingbat. As far as Ohio State,
are you just walking around saying the?
That's right.
The.
As someone who went to the University of Michigan and you went to the Rutgers University, we should.
No, actually, Rutgers is the State University of New Jersey.
There you go. Well, now you
themselves.
can use it. But I think it was Trevor Noah, it's who Alexi brought up before, or no, Albert brought up before. I think he went through like they crossed out all the words "the" and what sentences would look like if you took that all out.
There were so many more things I wanted to talk about.
It was the dumbest trademark application in history.
You're not a fan.
No, and it came from Ohio State, which just made it worse.
I've got more I want to talk to you, but we're pretty much out of
Phillies?
time. Phillies justify failed a drug test before the Triple Crown. They're going to pass pro players in California.
We're going to have to do like a post-show thing where we'll just continue it on YouTube or something.
All right, we'll have to go there. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Make sure to join us next Friday night to help you start your weekend in style. Have a great one. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.